Hi there guys, today we are doing the mount position, our basic submission attacks from the mount. Starting with the most basic is your shoulder lock, which is the Americana, thereafter moving on to the armbar, finally finishing off with our arm triangle and our triangle finishes. Guys, to get into a good position to attack from the mount, you must understand the subsections and the sub-controls within mount very well. This will create a clear pathway into generating successful attacks. So let's get started, guys. We're going to start with the Americana. Now the Americana from the mount position works very simply. When I'm in the mount, when you are in the mount position, the most common reaction you'll get from any sane person is they want to cover their face and block. Okay, now when you're attacking the Americana, you need to see from which positions you can actually attack. It is possible to attack an Americana whilst in the low mount position, with your chest, with your hips driving into the opponent's sternum, your grapevines locked up. You can then apply pressure with your chest and both your arms to flatten the arm you wish to attack. Do not try and tricep extend your opponent's arm to the floor. It's very seldomly going to work. You need to utilize your body weight and your chest pressure to drive the opponent's hand to the floor to overpower it. Now, if I was in a grapevine position, that could be done with my chest and my hands, driving that to the floor. I'm taking control of the arm in 2 points. High on the wrist, low on the elbow. Extending my elbows, driving downwards. I then take my elbow and I wedge it between the opponent's ear and shoulder. When I grab his wrist, guys, I don't grab it with my thumb around the wrist. I grab it so that my thumb and fingers are on the same side. My hand on the elbow, there I can C-cup around, drive it down. Once I've pinned, my elbow comes between his ear and his neck. I can keep my grapevines in play, or I can stay in the monkey mount position. From here, I'm going to take my elbow hand, bring it underneath the opponent's hand. I then figure four my hands, bringing my own wrist into play. Then I take my supporting hand and grab my wrist that is holding on to the opponent's wrist. We call this the figure four grip. With the figure four grip, the key to finishing a successful Americana is to keep the back of his hand glued to the mat, to be able to elevate his elbow as high as we can, and then paint the floor in a straight line with his hand down towards his heel. What you must avoid is picking his hand off the floor and then trying to finish it. Ensure his hand stays planted to the floor, elbow as high as you can, and then paint the floor with his hand. Now, this can be done from the grapevines where I have both my feet interlaced in the mount. It can also be done where I have one of my legs high in the monkey mount and one low in the grapevine position, thereby having control of his hips and his leg whilst finishing. The next attack we're going to work on is the armbar. The armbar, one of the most common attacks in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. It involves me putting pressure into the opponent's arm, placing his joint on a hard surface or a fulcrum, and then hyperextending it, giving us the tap. Easy way to first learn an armbar. If you've never done one before, have the opponent have his hands directly up towards you as if he's reaching for your throat. Take both your hands, make a circle around the arm you want to attack. Bring your left hand on the outside and my right hand on his chest. And I'll put both my hands one above the other. So the left hand above the right hand, and I'm going to push on his chest and come up to my heels or my feet. From this particular position, I'm then going to turn on the opponent's chest and step the outside leg over his head. I'm going to sit on my butt. So you can do that very slowly until you're comfortable with it. Now in this particular position, the elbow of the opponent's hand must be deep above my waistline. His thumb must be facing up towards the ceiling and the forearm must be glued to my chest. I want to have my heels pulling in tight underneath his armpits. My knees are coming inwards, providing that inward pressure. I want to have my butt as close to his shoulder as I can. I can't do an armbar with my butt away from him. If there's a cavity, the armbar is not going to work. You want to keep your butt nice and tight up against that shoulder. When I take control of the opponent's wrist, I want to get as high as I can on the wrist, ensuring that his thumb is facing up. If his thumb turns, it's going to change the angle to which my pressure goes into his elbow, where he wouldn't be forced to tap because his elbow will bend naturally. So thumb up to the ceiling, glue it to my chest, put my knees together, lay back, and as I do so, I'm driving my hips upwards into his elbow to get the finish. Do not go to the back and then try and pull the arm like a lever. Keep the arm connected to your chest the whole way down so that the submission comes on as your back hits the mat. That is a very simple and basic way to do an armbar. So we'll look at that again. Now, to tighten up that armbar and make it so that it's efficient and works even against a resisting and skilled opponent, we've got to hone that in a little bit. So there's a little adjustments we've got to make to that. So instead of making a circle now in the arms, we're going to attach ourselves to the arm we're going to attack. Our grips are going to be slightly different. Our hips are not going to raise off the opponent as much as when we were first learning the movements. We're going to attach ourselves to the arm, keep our hips nice and tight around the opponent's shoulders and elbow, and then we're going to pivot in a way that's more technical and efficient. This is how it's going to be done. So when we come into the armbar position, the first thing we're going to want to do, control the arm we're attacking. If I'm going for the right arm of the opponent, my right hand is going to grab the tricep. I'm reaching across and cupping the tricep. My left hand is coming through and is holding on to the opponent's wrist. Now from here, I've got to pick up my far leg and I've got to pivot in to cut an angle on the opponent's chest. I then lay my feet at a 90 degree so that there's no space between my hips, my groin, and the opponent's shoulder. The hand that was controlling the wrist can base on the mat to give me more stability, and then take the far leg and make a circle around his head. If I'm laying back on my own leg, I won't be able to move it. I have to base forward, take the weight off the back leg, extend it, and then make the circle around the opponent's head. The finish is exactly the same as a simple armbar. My heels are coming tight to the opponent's armpit and neck, knees together, high on the wrist, lay back and drive my heels to the floor whilst extending my hips into the opponent's arm to get the tap. Make sure when you're doing a good armbar, all the gaps and the holes are full. There's no space for him to wiggle or to pull his arm loose. Guys, another key to get a successful armbar attack is when you've isolated that arm, take your knee on the same side and drive it nice and deep under that opponent's armpit. So instead of keeping it way down here and trying to attempt the armbar, get that knee nice and high next to the opponent's head, under his armpit, lean across, and then finish your armbar. Cut that angle, sit on him, clear, and finish. If whilst doing an armbar you find the elbow is causing discomfort in your groin area or quite sore, you can then turn and take the arm onto the hip bone itself and use that as the fulcrum to which you can finish your armbar, driving your hips up whilst pushing down on the opponent's wrist. Next submission we're going to be looking at is the arm triangle. Like a normal triangle, the preconditions for an arm triangle are isolating and making a circle around the opponent's head and a trapped arm. We're going to use our arm and our head to then contract and squeeze around the opponent's arm and neck and get the choke. When you're doing an arm triangle, guys, a successful arm triangle, if done correctly, should be finished with one arm before that finishing lock comes into play. That's how you know you've got a good tight arm triangle in place. Simple way to go about doing this is take a head control and get your hand on an underhook. So I've got the head control and then I've got an underhook control. The key is to walk your hands all the way up so that you've got a gap and an angle whereby your head can slip by the opponent's elbow. Up until you can clear that elbow, you're not going to be able to take sufficient control off that arm we want to choke him with. So my elbow, guys, is controlling the head, has to be deep. I can take my hand and I can grab his far armpit, driving my elbow to the floor on that rear hand. I don't want to have a shallow grip with that hand where his neck has a gap between my bicep and his neck. We want to have that hand as deep as we can all the way through. I can also, once I've cleared, take my hand on the underside and grab his own head to lock it into place. I then shift my ear to the outside of the elbow and I begin to slide my body weight downwards so that the shoulder is seated correctly under the chin. Once it's seated under the chin, guys, get your temple to touch the opponent's temple and take your forehead and place it onto the floor. Now you could go back into side control to look to finish this, but we're going to finish it from the mount position. So temple control into the opponent's head, my forehead to the floor. Once my forehead hits the floor, I'm turning my body into the opponent, locking my hands, driving with the shoulder and getting the finish. The pressure comes, guys, from my shoulder, my body weight driving into the neck, and my head pushing his head into the choke. So there's an angle that's generated. Once I've cut deep, my head connects, and I finish, my body turns into the choke itself. One more time. Notice how I collapse my hip on the same side as I finish the arm triangle choke. Guys, when you're doing the arm triangle choke, if you can't get the arm across with just your arms, you can place your foot on the same side on the mat and then connect your elbow to your knee. And utilizing the power of the hip, the knee and the leg, you can then more efficiently clear the arm across, hide the head, temple to temple, connect your hands, head to the mat. Guys, an arm triangle choke does not require a lot of squeezing when done correctly. If you feel you're gassing your arms out and squeezing away, 9 out of 10 times you don't have the shoulder placement and the choke sunk in correctly. Ask feedback from your partner. If it's not on the neck and doesn't feel like a choke, you need to make an adjustment. Okay guys, last submission we're going to work on is the triangle from the mount. Can look quite complex and complicated, yet very simple. Same principle as this triangle from your back. You want to secure the arm, you want to secure the head, wrap it with our legs, get our arms involved and get the finish. Now, you cannot finish an arm triangle from the mount or initiate it when you've got his back flat on the mat and his head glued into the floor. You've got to have him cut at an angle so he gives us a space for the leg. The trick is getting him onto his side. Alright guys, so when you initiate the triangle from mount, to get the guy onto his side can be done in two ways. Either in the process of him trying to escape, he gets on his side by shrimping, etc. Or I can begin an attack whereby his defense is to get onto his side. One way of doing this is to attack an arm or a shoulder. Generally, when you begin to separate an arm or the shoulder from an opponent, they will turn to it to help that hand and prevent the isolation of it. This is where we're going to now attack from. First thing is first, I'm going to take control of his head. I'm going to take my hand around the back of his head and I'm going to cup around his shoulder, or I'm going to grab his hand if it is available. My bottom foot, what I want to do with that is clear the gap between his head and his arm. I can keep that space open by momentarily stepping on his leg. So here, I can momentarily step on his bicep to keep that gap open. I have to pull his head off the floor and allow my foot to clear through. When my leg comes through, I've got to lean away to be able to then lock up my knot on the far side. If I sit, it can be difficult to get your foot behind your own hammy. So we want to lean away, grab your shin, and then lock it up. Once you've locked it up, like a normal triangle, bring your knees together in line, turn in. You can either grab the head, pull up while sitting on his neck. My calf and my hamstring are coming together like a guillotine to get the finish on the opponent's neck. When I mean a guillotine, I mean like an actual paper cutter. A guillotine with the blade cutting my hammy and his calf coming together to cut off the blood flow to his neck. So the triangle setup, guys. Number one, attack the arm, get him to one side. As he gets to one side, pick up the head, create a space. Temporarily keep the gap open by stepping on it. You can also isolate the top arm by pulling it into you and circling with your leg and your hand. That foot cuts through, I grab my own shin and I lean away, freeing up my foot to be able to lock in the triangle. Sit back down, cut an angle, pull on the head to get the finish. I can also turn towards a leg, reach for a leg, pull the leg in, and then get the triangle finish from the mount position. When you're attacking the triangle from mount, guys, take your time. Once that space is open, you want to keep that head off the floor for as long as you can to allow your leg to slip in behind. When he's on his side, either he gave it to you by trying to get into a shrimp position, we can attack it, or when he tries to defend his arm from being attacked, he will thereafter try and protect his own arm, we can then attack it. Going through all the submissions we just did, guys, the Americana can be attacked from both a low mount and a middle mount, not very effective from a high mount. Your armbar can be attacked most effectively from a high mount position. Your triangle can only be attacked from a high mount position, and your arm triangles can be attacked from either low mount positions or high mount positions. Take each of these sub positions with mount, get familiar with them, thereafter apply the relevant submissions to each of those positions. These are your basic fundamental submissions that you can use as your foundation to develop your mount top submission game. Guys, thank you for watching the video. Be sure to like and subscribe, and we'll catch you on the next one.